Welcome back to MedTech Insights. Earlier this year, we brought you an interview with John Kawola, CEO of Boston Micro Fabrication, about the industry-wide push towards miniaturization and achieving tolerances down to tens of microns. Today, we're visiting the precision plastics experts at IPFL to see how that technology is being deployed on the manufacturing front line. Joining me is Adam Bloomfield, manufacturing engineer at IPFL. Adam, it's a pleasure to have you here today. When I spoke to John back in February, he said that the biggest driver for micro 3D printing right now is making procedures less invasive to improve patient recovery. From your perspective, how is that clinical demand translating into the real world components that you're being asked to produce?
So I suppose that's spot on. To make things less invasive, we're finding that our customers need to really focus on miniaturization. And I suppose that's not just making parts smaller, that's making parts functional whilst they're also getting smaller. So with 3D prints, concerns might be that you've got more surface finish or the parts aren't as precise. But that's exactly where the BMF technology comes into its own, to make sure that we've still got that control over the precision, to be able to get down to very fine and intricate geometries to make sure that the applications can actually still be innovative. And then we also need to make sure that's done very well. So the surface finishes on all of the axes, and then also making sure them small features are really maintaining and performing how they need to with these applications, especially when you're talking about sort of invasive procedures. Even if we're talking about endoscope shells, for instance, or keyhole surgery, and we're using these tools. Now, you want to make sure that all of these are robust options going forward. You know, there's a full cycle of things to consider there, whether it be from concepts or prototypes through to pilot manufacture or batch manufacturing, whether it's going to be an alternative to injection molding or not. But actually, I think that by using the BMF tech, we can make sure that for these less invasive procedures, we can really focus on that miniaturization aspect. That's the real big thing here. But whilst also maintaining the functionality and the performance that we really need.
Now, you mentioned the endoscope shells. IPFL's working on those, working on microneedle arrays and microfluidics. What makes these specific applications so challenging to produce using traditional tooling, and how does micro 3D printing bridge the gap?
So I suppose the common challenge is that the parts are small. You're talking microneedle arrays. We might be talking on-skin wearables, endoscopes and microfluidics. Similarly, they've got very small and intricate features. We might be talking thin walls. We might be talking very fine needle tips. So the base of the needle might be a millimetre or so, but then the tip of this, we need to actually make sure that something that's designed digitally as an infinite tip, physically it's got to stop somewhere. So we need to make sure that we can actually produce that. So that's the real challenge, is that the parts are small, but it still has a job to do. So, you know, something like with endoscope shells, it has really limited space that it needs to fit. With microfluidics, we've got a channel that doesn't need to just work on screen or in your analysis software, but actually it needs to work in the real world as well. So especially during early stage development, that's where traditional tooling or machining might not be the answer. It might slow things down or force people into certain decisions too soon that might actually compromise on their design and actually alter innovation. By using micro 3D printing, we can actually bridge that gap. And it lets the customer test these small geometries before they commit to a more fixed route. The geometry is small, but the functions are still very important, especially with 3D printing. It can be utilized not just at prototype stage, but also through the development cycles all the way towards the traditional tooling. And it doesn't lock someone into a design before they've established the functionality first. So it can be a really useful tool at R&D and at pilot manufacturing.
Now, in MedTech, navigating R&D and clinical trial windows mean that timing is crucial. IPFL is known for rapid turnaround times. How do you move so quickly while working within such razor-thin micron tolerances?
So I suppose the range of kit that we've got really helps us to react quickly, making sure that it is, for want of a better phrase, horses for courses. We've got lots of different routes, production routes, but I suppose that we can react because we've got that range, but also it means that we don't have to shoehorn any particular application into any particular technology as well. We try to make sure we've got the right tech for the kits. To make sure we do this right, we also have to give it a lot of consideration before we actually produce the parts. So it doesn't mean that we're going to rush it. It means that we need to identify the risks early, where the failure points might be, understand them, and then make sure we pay particular attention to those critical areas. So we can spot them risks early, then it means that we can address them and actually have really effective and efficient throughputs all in one go without having to go back and retry. We don't want to have to do that. And we validate everything that comes off the machines. We run it through microscopes and or inspection processes just to make sure that it is actually as expected. And then we can recycle that data back in if it's not. But ideally, we've given it enough consideration at the front end so that we don't have to risk any failures moving through. So we can make sure that it really comes down to effectiveness alongside versatility that we've got, and then the sort of the extensiveness of each technology that we've got as well.
Now, at the end of March, you installed the BMF MicroArch D1025. What was the exact technical or capacity bottleneck that you were trying to solve for your clients?
I suppose, so if the background is that we were running the 10 micron machine already, we installed that back in 2022. So we're about 4 years into that now. And then we installed the 2 micron machine a couple of years ago as well. So got very high precision with the 2 micron, great XY control of each pixel going down. So really great control for them small features, but also the overall precision as well. 10 micron, great workforce, and it really does solve a lot of issues that we might have had with our customers previously on other bits of tech. But by installing the D1025 from BMF, the dual resolution machine, we've then added a faster 10 micron solution on top of our existing 10 micron solution. But then we've also added the capacity to run at 25 micron resolution. So we can actually run in the same build. We can switch from 10 micron to 25 micron. So we've got that hybrid functionality as well. So I suppose the bottleneck was between the two technologies might have been through precision or throughputs. And the demand in the industry for micro work in general was growing, but not every job needed 2 micron resolution. Many jobs had the 10 micron resolution, but we thought actually by increasing our capacity, not only by adding this new machine, but also by adding this new resolution as well, this 25 micron resolution, actually we're able to produce parts faster. We can be more reactive. And then it actually means that we can, I'll use the phrase again, horses for courses. We don't need to be running 2 micron or 10 micron on everything. We can run 25 micron and we can switch to 10 micron. Gives us more choice, more capacity, but better technology assignments for the customer as well. So I think it's really come out and been really beneficial for our customers.
Now, the D1025 reduces your print zones from 60 down to 15 or even 4. How does that physically change your throughput on the actual factory floor?
It does, yeah. So I'll try my best not to go too technical on it, but it's nice to give everyone a good idea of the background. We're taking this projection that's made up of all your pixels, that's curing this top layer of your photopolymer resin. Now, the size of that pixel is in relation to the technology, so the 2, the 10, the 25. So in practical terms, by having less print zones, because on the D1025 it has a larger print zone with a higher resolution projector, it means the machine has less work to do to cover the same build area. So fewer print zones means fewer transitions, shorter builds, and then it means that we've got overall more capacity. So the 10 micron on the D1025 is actually faster than the 10 micron mode on our S240, for instance, which is the one that we installed 4 years ago. On the S240, it will be 60 print zones, but then we can drop right down to the 15 on the D1025, or if we switch to 25 micron mode, then it's just 4 big projections across the bed. And the lack of transitions between each zone means that the machine becomes much more efficient. So that can affect our scheduling. We can assign it depending on the jobs, make sure they're actually suitable. And it's really important for that to be the case, especially for our R&D customers. In MedTech, in defense, even industrial applications, it really matters because their development windows are often quite short, or their lab space might be quite limited as well. If we can turn iterations around faster, they can learn faster. And that means they can consume that innovation, really get it out to market much faster. So fewer exposures, fewer transitions, reduces the machine time on the jobs and the capacity for more work. So that translates for our customers into faster lead times and shorter development times.
Now, we've touched on my next question a bit already, but obviously a standout feature is the hybrid mode, switching between the 10 and 25 micron. How does that work in practice, and what are the cost benefits of it?
We're going to use the resolutions where they are needed. So we can use 10 micron resolution where it matters.
Yeah.
Critical features, thin walls, fine needles, for instance. But the bulk of assemblies might be to fit a larger piece of equipment, for instance, especially for microfluidics. So it might be in a larger manifold array or assembly or a piece of special purpose equipment. So we don't need to be using 10 micron on this larger frame of this microfluidic. We can run that at 25 micron, which will be faster, which results in lower costs. Even just the fact that it's faster means that it's going to get into the customer's hands quicker as well, and frees up our capacity to be more reactive as well. So we can run at that 25 microns to get the bulk of the work out. When we get to see a feature that is a fine needle, for instance, or a small channel, like a droplet generator, for instance, we can switch to 10 micron mode for them layers, and then we can have much greater XY control. So we can really gain that control on where them channels, where them features, or where them walls start and end. And then when we need to close everything off, we can switch back to 25 micron mode and finish the build off. It is really a case of using the right mode for the geometry. So it's really adding value there to have that faster resolution where it makes sense.
And with micro 3D printing hitting these extreme tolerances at much faster speeds, do you feel like we're at a point now where additive is moving into true batch production?
Moving into true batch production. Yes, I suppose we are starting to get there. True full-on production, I suppose that's harder to define. So I suppose it's a case of identifying it very carefully. So if we was to consider, for instance, trying to get into injection molding levels, then that's when it really becomes a case of, is it a universal replacement? No, but we are talking very fast prototyping, which we can't necessarily do with tooling. We can do very good and very fast pilots, manufacturing and batch production as well, all of which does have advantages. We can be more adaptive. We can change designs without slow or expensive tooling changes. We've got the classic 3D printing side of things as well, where you can be a lot more liberal, should we say, with your geometries. You can consolidate your assemblies, and then you can optimize the geometry as well. So you can do things that aren't necessarily available. So if you've got that specialist product, you need to start with one off, for instance, then that's completely viable. You need to scale that to a few dozen, very viable as well. But then it goes onwards from there, depending on the geometry. Really, you can start scaling that up, and it's just a part of the calculation, I suppose, is a good way to say it. We're not looking to replace something like injection molding. If the part is small, complex, or high value, then it starts to makes sense very quickly to actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very viable route for lots of people now that we're finding.
Now, you've recently introduced low viscosity materials and a new BMF clear material. Why are these optical and fluidic properties so critical for applications such as lab on a chip?
So I suppose lab on a chip and microfluidics, the low viscosity is a really important area for us. So this comes down to the likes of BMF and their material development. So they've got a great range of materials. And what we're really looking at is the ones that have got biocompatibility. I also need that low viscosity. So if we're trying to get our channel sizes smaller and smaller, we need to make sure we can actually clear out the resin that is left in them channels post-production. So because of the method, it traps that resin in afterwards. If we are dealing with a thick resin, then trying to clear that out just isn't viable. And it means that your channel sizes have to be much larger. So a 1 or a 2 millimeter channel, yes, with a thick resin, it's viable. But once we're starting to talk about, a very common one is 180 microns or so. Again, it's not really pushing the limits of anything, but 180 microns, I suppose that could say it's almost double the thickness of a human hair. It's viable. But once we start really dropping down, especially for droplet generators, or even when we've done some longer serpentine mixers, we're trying to get down to the smallest we've achieved is 20 microns on quite a long aspect ratio as well. We need to make sure that trapped resin is cleared out thoroughly. So that's where the low viscosity resins come in, especially when they've got a good biocompatibility as well. To make sure that the channels are actually doing what they need to be doing is then when we're looking at clear materials. So BMF did just recently release their clear material, and that's got some biocompatibility to it as well. The previous ones that we were using, they had a yellow tint to them because of particular chemical makeup of the resins. This one now, they changed that, and now we've got clear parts that look much more like acrylic, for instance, which we're very used to seeing because IPFL's other side of the business, the machine and fabrication side, we do lots of work with acrylic and COCs and polycarbonates. So to do it with 3D printing is really useful as well. It means that our customers can use different optical inspection and measurement and validation methods than they might have not been able to use on some of the other formulations. Being able to see what is happening inside them channels is really important. We need to see what's happening. We need to understand the flow, make sure we're looking out for them blockages or just seeing how the fluid behaves in them channels. It's very different to see what's happening real world than comparing it to what's happening on the screen, for instance. So it's really important for us to have that low viscosity, and the clear as well is really changing how we approach some jobs now.
How close do you actually work with BMF on the materials side of things? Do you tell them what you need in materials and then they work on it? Or how does that relationship work?
I suppose it might be too much of a stretch for me to say that I have any influence over what the extensive BMF team are doing. We do feedback as much as we can to them. So we try to make sure that what we are seeing as boots on the ground, as it were, what are our customers saying to us? Why are they saying we can't use one material or can't use another, for instance? So we try to make sure we work very closely with BMF. We have them on site quite a lot, and we're with them at events quite a lot. And we make sure that we really just make sure we stay in touch to have this back and forth, make sure we know what's coming, and make sure that we're feeding back in. And I think BMF find that useful as well to see what do we need as manufacturers, as a manufacturing supplier, as a subcontractor, but then also what are our customers asking for as well. So it's a case of taking all of that information upstream. How much it all gets used, I'm not sure, but it all seems to be going in the right direction anyway. So it seems to be working.
Now, my final question. IPFL has been working with precision plastics since 1969. Looking at how far the technology has evolved since then, where do you see the company pushing boundaries next?
I suppose we've always had quite a lot of an evolution. So the background of the company is that we started with Fabrication, plastic fabrications, lots of molding and forming and joining. That evolved into CNC, that evolved into 3D printing, all of which we still do. So they're additions. And then that evolved into this need for micro 3D printing as well. I suppose we're not looking to just continue making parts smaller or more precise just for the sake of it. We really need to make sure that we're making micro manufacturing in particular. We need to make it more practical. We need to make sure it's accessible for our customers and not just accessible for very high value MedTech applications, for instance. Working with the likes of MedTech and defense and industrial, that's great. But if they're too high value, it means that it's not making it as accessible. So for us to make sure that we are improving our capacity, our throughput, our workflows, and making sure that as a manufacturing engineer, trying to be as lean as possible with the processes to make sure that we can have good throughput and good functionality, I think it makes it more accessible and more practical. That's the real thing there, is we want to make sure that people can actually use these pieces of tech and make sure it works its way down. Yeah, we're not just going to get smaller and more precise just for the sake of it, but we want to make sure we can validate everything on the way through and make it accessible.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time. If people want to get in contact with IPFL, want to work with you, what's the best way to do that?
I suppose the IPFL website, ipfl.co.uk, is a great first stop. People are more than welcome to email me at adam@ipfl.co.uk, or they can give us a call as well. Always happy to have a chat.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Oliver.